There are moments when I know for sure I am being watched, not by ordinary eyes, but by those hidden in the dark. What amazes me is not the surveillance itself, but the reason behind it. You and I carry something powerful enough to distort the order they try to hold tight. Do you want to know why your very presence alone is enough to make the system tremble? I'll show you. Sit still for a few seconds and feel a strange truth. You are being watched. Not like the curious glances on the street, not like the fleeting attention when you walk into a room. This is a silent, deliberate kind of observation, one that only those who truly carry weight ever experience. I know this because I've lived in it, and today I want you to recognize yourself there. If you were only a faint shadow, you wouldn't be watched. If you were only background noise in the crowd, no one would bother to file a dossier under your name. If you were just an outsider, no eyes in the dark would have to follow your every step. It's because you create gravity, because you bring difference, that you are deemed worth watching. I remember the first moment I realized this, when my very ordinary actions suddenly drew excessive attention. A small gesture, a seemingly meaningless sentence, a moment of silence before a crowd. Then I felt uneasy, even doubted myself. Why were they scrutinizing me so closely? But then I realized, if I had no weight, if my presence did not shake anything in their system, no one would waste the effort to look. The truth lies here. People don't watch the meaningless. They only watch what can break, and you are that. Think of gravity. No one notices a dust particle falling, but everyone is pulled toward the earth. Wherever you are, the place changes. You walk into a room, the air shifts. You stay silent, others grow restless. You simply exist, but that existence forces others to adjust. That is the clearest proof of the weight you carry. I want you to see this paradox. The surveillance you think is a burden is in fact proof you cannot be underestimated. When you feel someone staring, understand that in their eyes you are not invisible. On the contrary, you are a potential threat. They fear you might do something they cannot control. They fear you will change the flow, break the script, flip the board. And that is why they watch you as if you were a dangerous variable. Have you ever wondered why your presence makes others tense? Why some always try to learn more about you than necessary? It's not because they like you, nor because they are idle. It's because you pose a threat to the balance they cling to. Let me tell you a simple but evocative detail. When I sit in a meeting, I notice there are eyes that never leave me. At first I thought it was just habit, but then I paid attention. They didn't really care about what I said. They watched how I paused, how I breathed, how I held the pen in my hand. In that moment, I understood that to them, I was a signal, and so are you. They read you like one reads a map. They fear that even a small gesture of yours could trigger an earthquake. Do you find that interesting? When you're not trying to influence, you still influence. When you're not trying to control, you still make their system lose control. And they know it. That's why they watch you. I want you to pause and admit, if you feel the pressure of being watched, don't see it as a burden. See it as confirmation. No one wastes time watching someone who has no value. There's no dossier for the mediocre. No meeting draws diagrams of a harmless person's movements. The attention you receive is the mirror reflecting your inner weight. This truth may make you uncomfortable, but if you use it, it becomes a source of power. Instead of running away, you can use that very observation as a tool to define yourself. Each time they look at you, remind yourself, I matter enough for them to watch. And that is not an illusion, it's an objective fact. I chose to see surveillance as proof of my strength, because if the whole system must focus on you, it means you have gravity. And if you have gravity, you can bend the space around you. This leads to an inevitable result. They cannot ignore you, even if they want to. You become a variable in all their calculations. You are the uncertainty they must add to the formula. And precisely because of that uncertainty, you become a threat. But a threat in what sense? Not a threat to destroy, but a threat to change. You do not annihilate, you force them to adapt. And adapting means admitting, you exist, you carry weight. So each time you feel someone watching, each time you sense a strange gaze, smile. It's a signal that you've crossed the border of the ordinary. You may not realize it, but in that moment, you've shaken the space around you. And you need to know exactly when they pour energy into watching you is the moment you've already won half the battle. Because you've forced them out of balance just by being present. You are watched because you have weight. And when you realize this, you are no longer afraid. You turn it into certification, into your ticket to the bigger arena. They watch you not to diminish you, but because you stand where they cannot ignore. And you know what? From now on, the question is no longer, why do they observe me, but what will I do with that attention? I once thought prisons only existed with chains and steel walls, but then I discovered the most dangerous kind of captivity leaves no scratch on the skin. It has no bars, no iron locks, yet it holds people tighter than a dungeon. It is a prison made of whispers, invisible glances, silent observations that make you question yourself. Am I okay? Am I wrong? Should I go on or stop? I know that feeling well because I once lived in it. You can sit in a room full of people, no one directly criticizes you, yet you still feel as if an invisible net is wrapping tightly around you. A casual remark in a corner, a fleeting bitter smile, a quick glance that turns away. They combine into a wall, making you start to doubt your own worth. You think you're free, but in reality, you're trapped in a cage made of air where the jailer doesn't need to touch you, yet still makes you shrink. That cage operates on the doubt you plant in yourself. This is the most subtle scheme. Instead of using violence to control you, they plant the seed of insecurity so you limit yourself. You think you're being careful, but that caution is the chain. You think you're keeping the peace, but in truth you're letting their silence choke your own voice. I remember once when I was about to speak before a crowd. No one stopped me, no one said don't speak. Yet I felt the whole room hanging with a weight. The eyes looked at me as if to probe, as if to remind me, be careful with every word, because we're noting it all. In that moment, I realized the invisible iron cage never binds with force, it binds with fear of being judged. And that is what's truly frightening. Let me be blunt. When you start living to please the eyes of others, when you start bending your words out of fear of the whispers outside, you've locked your own door to freedom. You no longer act according to what you believe. You act according to the script they've already written in their heads. And thus you become an actor in their play without anyone forcing you. But I chose to break it. I realized that every whisper is actually only an echo of the other person's insecurity, not the truth about me. Every watchful eye is actually only a reflection of their fear when they see me different. They build the cage not because I'm weak, but because they fear I'm strong. From that moment, I changed my view. Instead of seeing whispers as chains, I saw them as proof. The more whispers behind my back, the more scrutinizing eyes, the more I stood where they couldn't ignore. I turned the cage into a mirror reflecting my value. But to do that, I had to focus on one principle. I don't let others' eyes decide my path. I hear them, I see them, but I don't belong to their cage. I belong to the road I choose. Sometimes you'll feel suffocated by that invisible wall, but remember, the wall is only strong when you acknowledge it. As soon as you dare to walk through, it dissolves like mist. In reality, there are no chains around you except the chains in your own thoughts. I know you felt this too, hearing someone speak vaguely about you, seeing someone glance quickly at you, then going home and worrying all night, thinking you must have done something wrong. But you don't realize that cage exists only in your mind. If you stop granting them the power to define you, the iron cage collapses instantly. That's exactly how I escaped. I didn't react to the whispers. I didn't run from the eyes. I let them exist, but I walked as if they had no weight to define me. And strangely, when I did that, the whisperers started to fall silent. It turns out they're only strong when I accept their game. When I step off the stage they built, their entire script falls to the ground. You can do the same. Each time you hear a rumor, ask yourself, does it truly have the power to bind me? Each time you see a scrutinizing look, remind yourself, that's just proof of my strength, not a sentence. Walk with calm and you'll see those invisible bars turn to dust. I want you to understand deeply this. The iron cage of whispers and glances only imprisons those who accept being imprisoned. If you decide to be free, no gaze can lock your steps. And when you realize this, You not only break the cage for yourself, but also become a mirror for others still struggling inside their own cages. Because true freedom does not lie in escaping their eyes, but in daring to live without asking any eye for permission. There is a truth I want you to engrave. The attention you receive, in whatever form, is the receipt confirming your power. Every watchful eye, every whisper, every long silence in the room when you walk in, all are undeniable signs that your presence carries weight. People don't spend energy on the meaningless. They focus only where they feel uneasy. And if you feel invisible gazes circling around you, congratulations. It's proof you've reached a place many dream of but never attain. The place of someone others must watch. I remember the first time I realized this. Back then, I thought whispers and scrutinizing eyes were signs of hatred. I felt stifled, tired, even wished to disappear so everything would be lighter. But then, in a moment of stillness, I understood. If I were truly meaningless, no one would bother paying me attention. People don't make dossiers on the mediocre, don't gossip about the invisible, don't lose sleep tracking the gestures of someone unimportant. That very attention, whether positive or negative, became undeniable proof I was holding a special kind of power. That power wasn't in shouting loud enough to be heard, but in the fact that just by existing, they had to calculate. And I want you to see this truth in yourself. Have you ever asked why people around keep looking at you, talking about you, even when you're not seeking attention? Wondered why one small act of yours can change the air, spark hours of talk? If you've experienced that, the answer is clear. You have more influence than you think. The attention they give you isn't a curse, but proof you're impacting the world. Stop seeing it as a burden and start seeing it as a receipt signed by the system you're stirring. That receipt says, "You're too important for us to ignore." When I changed my view, everything changed. I no longer felt bound by the eyes. I felt validated. I no longer feared whispers. I saw them as proof my steps were strong enough to shake the ground beneath them. And I want you to do that too, because real power isn't in avoiding attention, but in using it as fuel to go further. Great figures in history, those who shifted the world, were the most closely watched. Every act, every word, every smile was recorded, analyzed, even twisted. And why? Because their influence was so great, even the smallest detail could shift the landscape. So, attention isn't a sentence, it's a reward. It's proof you stand at the center of the board. And here I want to ask you directly, not for information, but to see your real presence. Are you ready to change how you view the attention given to you? Are you willing to turn it from chains into a receipt of power? If yes, leave 3 words. I'm ready to change. Or if you don't want to write much, just the number 1 is enough for me to know you're here, that you've listened and walked along. Don't see it as small. For me, your presence, your confirmation, is the most precious thing. It tells me what I share hasn't fallen into a void, but touched a heart, a mind, eager to step out of the invisible cage and claim the power that's theirs. I'm grateful for that. And I believe the moment you leave your mark is also when you confirm to yourself, I'm no longer avoiding attention, I'm ready to turn it into strength. Strength doesn't come from avoiding eyes, but from standing tall under them, smiling and moving on. Each time they look, remember they've handed you another receipt. Each time they gossip, they've signed your value once more. And when you gather enough receipts, you'll see an obvious truth. You were never ordinary. The world has already written your name in its file. Your job is only to decide how to turn that file into your declaration. I once believed power only showed when we acted, spoke, or created disruption big enough to draw attention. But then I realized another truth. Even in silence, you can ruin the model they've built. Imagine a script already written, a stage prepared, your role assigned. They think by pushing you, you'll react. Step into their role and their game continues smoothly. But then, you don't. You choose silence. You don't react as expected. At that moment, their entire script collapses. I once sat surrounded by attacks. Everyone waited for me to react, to flare up, to say something foolish they could use. But instead, I stayed silent. I sat quietly, observing. At first, they grew louder, mocking, provoking. But then, as I didn't respond, my silence covered the room. The air shifted. I saw confusion in their eyes. I heard longer pauses. Their confidence eroded. That's when I understood Silence isn't weakness. Silence is the invisible knife cutting every wire they've set. Silence holds a power they never count on. In their model, your reaction is data. They predict gestures, replies, believing they can calculate you. But when you're silent, you pull that data away. Their measures collapse. They want to assign you a role, but you don't act. They want to cage you in a mold, but you don't step in. Their model turns to scraps. I've seen panic in the eyes of those who thought they knew me. When they can't predict me, they can't control me. And so can you. Refuse their game, and silence becomes your strongest move. People fear silence, thinking it helplessness. The truth is opposite. Silence is active. Silence declares, I don't play by your rules. And nothing confuses the system more than someone refusing the role. The system runs on prediction. They need to know your reaction to plan the next strike. But when you don't react, their predictions fail. Silence makes them look inward, question their plan, fall into uncertainty. That uncertainty makes them lose control. I've lived situations where silence was the sharpest weapon. Once, when slandered, I could have shouted, argued, defended, but I didn't. I stayed silent. At first, the slander seemed strong, stirring people, but with no reaction from me, observers wondered, if he's guilty, why is he calm? My silence became a bigger question than any justification, and it weakened the attack. The right silence can be stronger than thousands of explanations. It isn't denial or agreement, but a way to drain all energy from the board, leaving others trapped in their own plan. I'm not saying be silent always. Sometimes you must speak, but know when silence is power. Know when words only feed their game, and when silence makes it meaningless. If you use silence as a conscious choice, any model built to control you collapses. Silence isn't emptiness, it's space for truth to rise. When you don't argue, truth stands on its own. When you don't react, observers see instability on the other side, and that's victory. True strength is when you sit still and still change the room. True strength is when silence makes others lose confidence. True strength is when you don't enter the game and the game falls apart. You can ruin their model without a word. Once you grasp this, you'll never fear silence. Once you know, you'll never fear silence. You'll use it as tool, as weapon, as shield. I've seen it, lived it, and I know you can too. Sometimes the strongest reaction is no reaction. One day I suddenly realized I wasn't just being observed as a person, but monitored like a subject in a laboratory. Every action, every reaction, every pause of mine was recorded, analyzed, weighed like data in a report. And the truth is, you too are living in such a condition. You're not just a passerby, you are both an experiment and a variable. I want you to understand this clearly. They don't look at you with ordinary eyes. They look at you with the eyes of researchers. That means everything you do is treated as an indicator. One time you're silent, they record it. One time you react, they compare it. One time you smile, they measure it. In their world, you are not just human, you are a set of data. But here's what unsettles them. You are not a stable constant, you are an unpredictable variable. I remember once being cornered. They staged the story so I'd have to choose between reacting fiercely or accepting a loss. They thought I'd act as they predicted, that I'd show my true face so they could record and use it against me. But I chose differently. I didn't react as they expected. I turned my unpredictability into a weapon. And in that moment, I saw in their eyes their research model just failed. They thought they could decode me with repeated trials, but they didn't expect I'd be alert enough not to walk the path they set. You are in the same place. You are the experiment they want to control, but also the variable they fear. Let me explain. In research, what troubles scientists most isn't matching results, but data that breaks the hypothesis. And you are that data. You don't fit formulas. You skew results they thought secure. That's why they never stop observing you. Each step of yours is both risk and secret. I remember another moment when I felt like an object under a microscope. I knew some weren't just listening to what I said, but analyzing how I said it, the speed I paused, even my breathing. They wanted to dissect every detail to find a pattern. But they don't understand. Humans aren't machines, and I'm not a predictable specimen. I carry contradictions, changes, sudden decisions, and that's exactly what makes me the variable, rendering their measures useless. You must recognize this truth. If they study you clinically like that, it means you are not ordinary. No one studies the harmless, they focus only on what can alter the system. And that's you. Remember, every experiment has a purpose. They want your weakness, they want the formula to control you. But when you change rhythm, when you refuse predicted reactions, you render the experiment worthless. They think they're studying you, but in truth they reveal their dependence on your every move. And you can use that to reverse the game. I learned one strategy: never let yourself be the predictable constant. Sometimes be silent when they expect you to speak. Sometimes smile when they expect you to frown. Sometimes walk slowly when they expect you to rush. Each unexpected act is a strike that throws their model into chaos. You don't need to be fake, only alert enough not to let your reactions become exploitable data. In every lab, experiments fail because of unforeseen variables. You can choose to be that variable. True power is not in proving right or wrong, but in making them unable to predict you. When they can't predict, they lose control. And when they lose control, their game loses meaning. I've lived many moments being watched like an experiment, but instead of fear, I began to find it fascinating. I thought, if they must study me this much, it means I'm strong enough to unsettle them. And I want you to see that in yourself. You are not just the observed. You are living proof of instability in the system they try to hold. They dare not ignore you, because you are the factor that can shatter hypotheses. So instead of fearing scrutiny, smile, because even if they see you as an experiment, you remain the variable, ensuring their test never yields a perfect result. And that itself is victory. I once thought strength lay in explosive emotions. In moments we rose in anger, shouting to prove we wouldn't bow. But then I realized those outbursts are like straw fires, bright for a moment, then dead, leaving ashes. What truly changed my life wasn't fleeting intensity, but commitment to steady, lasting action. Here's what I want you to know. Emotion can move you, but only commitment carries you far. I remember times I flared from attack, eager to prove myself. I reacted strongly, acted fast, and for a moment I felt victorious. But days later, everything reset, leaving me exhausted. I lived by reaction, not direction. I let emotion lead without commitment to sustain. That lack sent me back to square one again and again. One day I asked, why stuck in this loop? Why start strong but never finish? The answer came, I live by emotional waves, never by committed action. Look at your life. Have you promised yourself change, started a journey, then days later lost resolve, felt energized by inspiration but quit when it faded? If so, you were like me. But I learned a principle that changed my life. Emotion is spark. Commitment is the lasting flame. A spark can't burn a forest, but with commitment you build a fire burning day and night. That fire lights the long road. I began with small, sure commitments. Instead of saying, I'll change everything today, I chose one daily repeatable act. I wrote goals, but more importantly, wrote actions with the pledge not to quit. Gradually, I saw difference. I no longer depended on passing inspiration. I lived by discipline and consistency. Commitment may sound dry, lacking explosive passion, but here's truth. That dryness builds real results. Ocean is wave, commitment is vessel. If you rely on waves, you drift. If you have a vessel, you reach shore regardless of waves. I recall when changing habits, at first, excitement filled me, but as before, it faded. At the crossroads of quitting or continuing, I chose not to rely on feeling. I reminded myself of my commitment, and I continued even without excitement. Those barren days taught me the greatest lesson. True freedom comes from discipline. You too have started fiery, then faded. That's not weakness, but failure to put commitment above emotion. You haven't turned resolve into repeated action regardless of moods. Change this and you'll see your real power. Think of the successful you admire. They don't surpass you in passion, they surpass you in commitment. They act even when unwilling. They move steadily even without thrill. That steadiness built achievements the world honors. Emotion has value, it starts journeys, but only commitment brings you to the end. Live by emotion, and you're victim to its rise and fall. Live by commitment and you own the path. I chose that. From then, I no longer feared losing inspiration. Inspiration may fade, but my commitment stays. That commitment shields me through storms. Look now at yourself. Are you living by emotion or commitment? Are you led by fleeting sparks or anchored by a pledge to finish? That answer decides if you stop early or go to horizons. I once chose wrong, but I corrected, and you can too. Real power isn't in emotions bursting briefly, but in actions repeated until the world must acknowledge you. Commitment to action. That is the fire that never dies. I have observed an unchanging rule of this world. Resources are never wasted on darkness. They always aim at where there is light, at the flame that is blazing. You can see that clearly in your life. When you are only a small spark, no one pays attention. But when you begin to shine, when the heat within you is strong enough for others to feel it, immediately every gaze, every effort to control, every layer of surveillance will converge on you. I have experienced that moment when my presence suddenly became the target of all kinds of pressure. At first, I thought it was unfair. Why should I be noticed so much when I only wanted to live true to myself? But then I understood. Not because I was wrong, but because I carried a flame they could not ignore. And so do you. If you have ever felt watched, judged, restrained, know that it is because you carry a power capable of changing the environment around you. Resources, whether of individuals or of an entire system, always move toward influence. No one squanders effort suppressing what poses no threat. They only concentrate force on what can bend the trajectory. And the truth is, you are the trajectory they track. I recall a time when I began to advance, when I had just reached a milestone that made those around me take notice. Only a few days later, I sensed new pressures appear, warnings, suspicious looks, strange actions that seemed harmless, yet were laden with scrutiny. At first I was puzzled, but then I realized, they never waste resources on the nameless. If they pour effort into observing you, then in their eyes, you are the flame. And this made me change my view completely. Instead of seeing it as pressure, I saw it as confirmation. My flame had grown large enough to demand their attention. I want you to look back over your life. When you were weak, no one cared, but the moment you stand up, you begin to move with strength. Immediately, someone appears to scrutinize, to test, not because you are wrong, but because you have begun to shine. And the rule is this: the bigger the fire, the stronger the wind. You may ask, why me? Why won't they leave me alone? The answer is simple. You have the capacity to burn what they wish to keep unchanged. You are the difference, the instability within their fabricated stability. You are the flame that can spread and transform the environment. And so they must channel resources to watch, control, and restrain you. But see, the truth behind it, the more resources are aimed at you, the greater your power. No one fires a cannon into the night. They only aim at the flame. I have learned to use that as fuel. Whenever I feel the pressure, I remind myself, this is proof I am on the right path. If I were only dust, no one would bother. I don't need to complain about surveillance. I only need to use it as a gauge of my inner heat, and I want you to do the same. Try to change your view. Every criticism, every scrutinizing gaze is a resource pouring into you. It doesn't make you smaller, it proves you are large enough to be a target. I've seen many give up when pressure mounts. They think it is a sign they are wrong, but the truth is, it is only a sign they have succeeded in becoming a flame. And remember, a small flame never frightens anyone. Only when you blaze does the world try to extinguish you. So if you are being watched, understand you are in the right place, and only you decide, will your flame be blown out, or will it blaze so fiercely that it turns pressure into fuel? I chose to let my flame burn bright, despite the storms, and you can too. Turn every resource against you into proof of your existence. Let each act of surveillance become a recognition. Most importantly, never forget, a flame is targeted only when it is strong enough to light the darkness. You are that flame. There is something that shocked me when I realized it. Sometimes the people watching me see my tomorrow before I can even picture it myself. They don't just care about what I do today, they analyze to guess what I might do tomorrow. And that foresight showed me an important truth. In their eyes, I am not an ordinary person drifting from day to day. I am an as yet unrevealed possibility. And I believe you are being seen that way too. Let me explain. In many moments, I thought I was merely moving by inertia, doing ordinary things, but then I noticed there are eyes that not only register my present actions, but also search for clues about what I will do next. When I pause, they ask, will he turn left or right? When I am silent, they analyze. What is he preparing to speak about? When I casually change a small habit, they immediately treat it as a signal of a larger plan, and that is when I understood. They are reading me like a forecast. I used to be surprised, even annoyed, to see people over-speculate about me, but then I thought, isn't that proof I carry a potential even I haven't fully seen? If they expend effort to calculate my tomorrow, it means they believe that tomorrow has influence. No one ever charts a meaningless road. They only draw maps when they believe the road leads somewhere important. And you, like me, are that road. I remember a time when a single small decision of mine made them react as if I were about to change the whole landscape. Then I realized that sometimes I belittle myself, but they don't. They see in me a capacity to spread, an energy that can erupt. They see my tomorrow before I can believe in it. And here is what you must remember. Sometimes you have not yet seen all your potential, but your observers already have. They do not fear who you are today, they fear who you might become. They don't care what you did yesterday, they care what you will do tomorrow. And that attention is clear proof you have a future you haven't yet reached. I learned to use this. Instead of feeling bothered by analysis, I see it as a mirror reflecting my capability. If they spend effort to predict my tomorrow, then I must live worthy of that tomorrow. If they believe I can bend the present, I must pour my whole commitment into turning that potential into reality. Isn't it interesting that sometimes others believe in your future more than you do? That they fear the tomorrow you will create while you haven't dared to dream it. Says one thing, your power is already visible enough that others cannot ignore it. Your only task is to catch up to the image they have already seen. I once felt pressured by those expectations, but then I understood. If they see my tomorrow, it is an opportunity to step faster, stronger, and surer onto the path the world itself is acknowledging. No one predicts the future of the mediocre. They only invest in forecasting those who can stir up storms. And if they are calculating you, you are one of them. Reflect on this. Perhaps you haven't seen all your strength, but those eyes have. They cannot stop your tomorrow. They can only worry and prepare. But you can do more. You can live to make that tomorrow brilliantly real. So never treat speculation about you as a burden. Treat it as a reminder that your potential is far greater than you think. I have learned to walk as if I were moving into a tomorrow others have seen from afar. And I want you to walk that way too. Because when others see your tomorrow first, you have no reason to doubt. You have only one choice. Live worthy of the future your very presence has already foretold. And that is the path that makes you not just the watched, but the one who rewrites the very map they tried to predict. I once heard them pin a simple label on me, abnormal. At first, I reacted fiercely. I asked myself why. Just because I didn't act like the majority or follow familiar trajectories, I instantly became an outsider. But over time, I understood that abnormal isn't a put-down. On the contrary, it signals that I carry a power that won't let others rest easy. That very irregularity forces them to stay up later, to hold more meetings, to pour extra resources into watching me, trying to explain me. In other words, I have made them work overtime. You need to know a truth. The system runs on prediction. It likes what can be measured, calculated, gathered into straight charts. When everything moves to a steady rhythm, people feel safe. But when an offbeat dot appears, the whole chart must be rewritten. And I am that dot. I don't follow the straight line they want. I don't act by the script they laid out. I am the variable that makes the whole system work overtime to track me. I remember once that, simply because I chose silence where they expected a reaction, a group sat for hours analyzing why. They guessed one possibility after another, but none felt certain. In that moment I realized, they don't waste time on me because I'm meaningless. They spend time because I'm unpredictable. And whenever you become hard to read, you become the focus. Think about it. People never write reports about the harmless. No one convenes extra meetings to discuss someone without influence. If they lose sleep over you, it means you bear a difference that forces them to recalculate. That difference is your advantage. I learned to turn irregularity into a weapon. Instead of fearing scrutiny, I took it as confirmation. I am important enough not to be ignored. I no longer want to resemble the crowd, because sameness dissolves you. Difference, even when called trouble, forces them to invest more in you, and in this game, whoever makes the other side work overtime is the one setting the tempo. I recall a conversation where someone blurted, "You're such a hassle." I smiled, because I knew hassle in their eyes meant impossible to ignore. A nobody is never a hassle. No one bothers to think about them. Only those who truly disturb the system get labeled that way. Once I understood this, I stopped seeing it as an insult. I treated it as a medal. Think back on your life. How many times were you called different, strange, abnormal? How many times did you feel scrutinized for not fitting the mold? If that has happened, congratulations. You are the variable that forces them to rewrite the formula. You are the reason they can't sleep. You are why they work overtime. And that, instead of a burden, is clear proof you have the power to make the whole system change its rhythm. Of course, living in irregularity isn't easy. It means you will be analyzed, suspected, discussed. But understand, that is the price of carrying an energy that cannot be diluted. If you can endure the gaze, if you can stand firm before dissection, then the very irregularity becomes your greatest weapon. While others chase ruts, you open new roads. While they repeat old formulas, you prove those formulas no longer hold. I chose that road. I don't try to become predictable, because predictable means controllable. I want to walk like a margin dot that forces every model to be rewritten, and I have seen the power of that choice. Each time they meet more because of me, analyze more because of me, I know my existence has forced them to expend energy. I don't need to shout to prove I matter. Irregularity proves it for me. Look straight at this. If you are called abnormal, you're on the right path. People never bother labeling a nobody. Only those who tilt the system get special attention. And remember, every label has power only if you accept it. If you treat abnormal as a burden, it will crush you. If you wear it as a badge, it becomes armor that carries you farther. I chose the latter, and since then, I feared no name. The more scrutiny, the more overtime meetings, the surer I am I'm heading the right way. So next time someone says you're unusual, don't rush to deny it. Smile. It means you've made them work overtime. Recalculate. Pour more energy into you. And in this game, that is the greatest victory. There was a time I lived suffocated by the feeling of being stared at. Every step, gesture, and choice seemed to fall within someone's sights. I thought it was punishment, as if the universe were making me pay just for daring to be different. But a quiet moment changed everything. I realized that observation wasn't a sentence. It was proof that I carried real gravity. From that day, I reframed my entire experience. Observation is not punishment, it is confirmation. I remember standing before a crowd, feeling eyes converge on me. At first I was flustered, hands faintly shaking, heart racing, head filled with what are they picking at? How will they judge me? Then, in an instant, I grasped something crucial. If I were truly meaningless, if what I was about to say had no value, no one would spend energy watching me so closely. That very attentiveness said I had influence. So I breathed deep, stood tall, and treated each gaze not as a threat, but as a receipt confirming my existence. Consider this. How many times have you felt scrutinized, judged, as if the world were against you? But you can choose another lens. Ask, if I were truly ordinary, why observe me so closely? Simple answer. You are not ordinary. They watch only what they believe can influence. In a society where people avoid attention, we easily treat being observed as torture. I did too. I felt tired, drained, imprisoned by I. But when I reframed it as a form of recognition, everything changed. I felt lighter. I stopped asking why me and started saying, because I have value, they can't ignore me. Observation can be a burden if you treat it as chains. Treat it as confirmation and it becomes fuel. Each gaze becomes motive to stand straighter, stronger, clearer about your path. And interestingly, when you change how you view observation, its meaning changes. It no longer exhausts you, it strengthens you. I remember another time when rumors spread about me. I knew some were quietly tracking my reaction, as if waiting to see me lash out or crumble. At first I intended to respond, to prove myself. Then I stopped. I thought, They watch closely precisely because they believe I can cause ripples. So I didn't perform to their script. I chose to stand still. That stillness became a declaration. I turned the trap of observation as punishment into a stage for my steadiness. You felt this too. Scrutinized, judged, even when you've done nothing wrong. Pause and think differently. If they spend time watching you, you matter to them more than you think. That's not a sentence, it's evidence. Use that evidence to move forward, not retreat. This world will never stop observing those who create impact. Anyone who steps out of the crowd, anyone who radiates a private flame, becomes a target. That's not punishment, that's the rule. The brighter the fire, the more eyes turn. The real question isn't how do I avoid eyes, but how will I use them to fortify my position. I chose to turn those eyes into a mirror. I look into it to see my weight. I use it as an indicator I'm on course. I let it remind me I am no longer invisible, I have gravity. You can do the same. Don't see the gaze as a sentence, see it as a certificate. Don't see observation as chains. See it as a sign you've entered the center. I promise, the moment you reframe it, your entire feeling will change. You won't feel tired, you'll feel proud. You won't feel afraid, you'll feel strong. And whenever you sense someone watching, you won't bow your head, you'll lift it and think, yes, I am worth looking at. Because observation is never punishment, it is admission that you've stirred the waters. It is proof you wield power. It is a reminder you're too large to ignore. Live by that truth and you'll see, every eye on you doesn't make you smaller, it makes you shine brighter. I once believed that if I lived upright and did nothing wrong, no one could use anything against me. But then I discovered a cold truth. In this game, truth matters less than utility. They don't need to invent things to take you down, because the real fragments of your life, the details that seem harmless, are enough to become weapons if placed at the right moment. And I recognize the first sign that you're being closely watched. They are sketching your morality and using your secrets as a kind of currency. I recall the times my past was suddenly brought back up. A sentence I blurted in anger, a message forgotten from years ago, a tiny decision I thought no one cared about. All of it reappeared, as if carefully kept in some archive. At first I shuddered. Why do such trifles matter? Then I understood. To them, each detail is raw material. They don't need the whole truth. They just need enough pieces to assemble a picture that serves their purpose. You must understand, your morality in their eyes is not truth but a sketch. They observe, jot down, gather signs to build a moral file on you. And that file doesn't reflect who you are, it reflects how you can be used. If they want you silent, they'll gently remind you they know a certain detail. If they want you to cooperate, they'll suggest what they could reveal. If they want to elevate you, they'll polish favorable details, turning you into a suitable model. None of it rests on truth, it rests on convenience. I used to think my secrets were a burden. Later I saw them differently. The fact they want to hold my secrets only proves I have value. People never stockpile the useless. Just as a treasury never stores trash, they never keep meaningless details. They keep only what can become currency for transactions. And if my life becomes a reserve, that means my influence is big enough to create a market. I remember an evening when an old acquaintance casually revealed there were conversations about me, where scraps of memory were gathered, strung together, then filed away. Hearing that, I was no longer afraid. I realized the very existence of those files is proof I've made them care. If I were truly small, no one would bother storing pieces of my life. And this is happening to you too. If you felt someone remembers a past mistake too clearly or an act you forgot long ago, you may be in their sights. They keep it not out of hatred, but to have something to bargain with. In this game, your memory becomes their asset. Your true value is measured, not by the mistake, but by the fact they kept it as capital. So what should you do? I found a way. Don't let secrets become chains. Whenever I stood up and admitted something, when I turned a weakness into a story I myself told, their entire archive lost its value. A secret is currency only while you fear its exposure. When you accept it, when you say, yes, that was me, and I've moved through it, the coin turns to ash. They have nothing left to trade. I saw the change in the eyes of those who thought they held an edge. When I was no longer afraid, they lost their sharpest weapon. Power lies not in hiding the past, but in owning it. If you can face those fragments and make them part of your road, no one can use them to bind you. Remember, the first sign you're under observation isn't public accusation, but silent gathering. When your past is summoned, when someone seems to know too many trivial details, understand, you're important enough to be their archive. But instead of fear, ask, how can I render that archive worthless? The answer always lies in the courage to own your story. No secret can destroy you if you bring it into the light. No file can bind you if you refuse to let it define you. Do the same. Because when you face truth, you find power isn't in the hands of the keepers, but in yours, the one who reframes the story and turns it into strength. Observation isn't to find truth, but to stockpile tools. Secrets aren't stains, but coins. But coins have value only while you fear. Once you cease fearing, you shatter the economy they built. If they need your secrets, it means you're strong enough to make them build a whole market around your name. And you can reduce that market to rubble simply by choosing to own your story. I once thought the small things around me were random. A sudden rumor, an offer arriving just when I was exhausted, a harmless question repeated in different situations. Looking back, I realized none of it was accidental. They were micro-experiments arranged with finesse to probe for my breaking point. And once you see this, you'll know you're being watched more deeply than you think. I remember a time when, in the midst of busyness and strain, someone asked me for seemingly simple help. Normally, I would decline gently. That day, pressure made me react differently. I snapped. I answered a bit harshly. Immediately, I saw their eyes go still, as if they had just recorded something. Then, the situation repeated, in another form, from another person. That's when I understood. They were testing. They didn't want to crush me yet. They wanted to know where I would crack. Know this. Those who seek control never waste resources on a killing blow before they know the weak spot. They try small taps, slight pushes, like a scientist tapping glass to find the thinnest area. These micro-experiments show you are under tight observation. They don't strike openly, they are drawing a map of your reactions. I notice a rule. Each rumor that arrives right when your spirit dips, each challenge that appears when you're busiest, is no accident. It's a test. They want to know if you choose silence or anger, pushback or yielding, protecting family or sacrificing them to keep an image. Each reaction isn't just behavior, it's a coordinate on your chart. And here's the scary part. They aren't in a rush. They're patient, willing to try again and again to paint a complete psychological portrait. A bit of temper, a bit of neglect, a moment of weakness. Together they form your model. They want to know where to press if ever needed. But when I faced this, I saw a truth. If they must work that hard, it means I'm strong enough not to fall easily. A weak wall needs no testing. People test only when the wall seems solid and they want the precise crack. If they test you, it's proof they believe you can stand. I changed my responses once I understood. Instead of letting emotion decide, I began observing myself. I treated each sudden scenario not as an obstacle, but as a deliberate test. And I chose to respond as if I were rewriting their data. They want to see me break, I go silent. They want my outburst, I smile. They want me to give up, I become more steadfast. Each time, I knew I was scrambling the map they tried to build. You can do the same. Real strength isn't avoiding every trial, but recognizing when you're being tested and choosing a response that confounds them. Their patience works only when you act by habit. Once you're conscious, habit vanishes and the game flips. I recall a moment when someone thought they had found my weak point. They repeated a familiar setup, expecting my usual reaction. This time, I chose differently. I didn't snap, I didn't wilt. I stood still. I saw confusion in their eyes. One small change in my response was enough to nullify the entire experiment. That's when I knew I had taken back initiative. Understand this. Their tests aren't to destroy you now, but to build a file. They want a map, but you can make that map worthless with disciplined unpredictability. Not chaotic surprise, but intentional surprise. Turn every trial into a chance to prove you are not easy to read. And when you're not easy to read, you cannot be controlled. So when small repeating situations appear, when you feel placed into odd trials, remember it's not random. It's the second sign. They're running micro-experiments to find your breakpoint. But you are not fragile glass. You are the stone that can chip the hammer if someone dares strike the wrong spot. I chose to stop fearing those experiments. I use them as training. You can too. Your true power isn't in dodging every test, but in being alert enough to know you're being tested, and disciplined enough to deny them the data they seek. Hold firm, and the experiment collapses. When it collapses, they lose the only weapon they have. I used to think enemies would make things up about me, invent lies to attack, but after many experiences, I discovered a more frightening truth. They don't need to lie, they only need to gather the contradictions in my life, string them together, and turn them into a sharp bullet. And that is the third sign you're being watched. They don't hunt for a big wrong, they patiently collect the small things, the inconsistencies, then forge them into an arsenal aimed at you. I recall once saying in a conversation that patience was a life value. Just days later, under stress, I lost my temper. That moment seemed to pass like any natural reaction. But no, someone remembered. Months later, I heard the story retold by a stranger as proof. I say one thing, do another. I understood my contradiction had been stored, a bullet chambered, waiting to be fired. We must understand perfection is unnecessary to them. What they need are cracks. Every person has contradictions. Words don't always match actions. Feelings don't always align with reason. Rather than seeing contradiction as human, they treat it as a resource. They archive each shard, stack it carefully, then use it at the opportune time. I saw how it works. Miss a promise once, they log it. Speak of courage, then hesitate. They log it. Called for honesty while keeping a corner hidden, they log that too. To you, it's ordinary life. To them, it's iron-tipped arrows. Enough arrows, and they mount a full assault. I was rattled at first, then reframed it. If they must sift for tiny contradictions, I'm sturdy enough that they can't find a fatal flaw. If I were truly weak, they wouldn't need such patience. So each recalled inconsistency became a reminder that I matter enough to be tracked at that granularity. They never waste effort gathering trivia on a nobody. Ordinary people's words, deeds, contradictions, no one cares. With you, each inconsistency becomes a weapon, proof you're not ordinary. Only those who influence get examined down to the small print. How did I get out of this trap? I learned to own my contradictions. I stopped running from the fact that I sometimes fail to live up to what I say. I accepted contradiction as part of growth. When I could say yes, I lacked patience. Yes, I fell short. Those moments taught me to grow. Their stored bullet turned to rotten wood. Once, someone tried to use my old words against me. I smiled. Yes, I said that. I'm different now. I learned from that contradiction. They fell silent. Their weapon works only if I deny it. Once I own it, it's not a bullet, it's a memory. Your contradictions aren't a weakness. They're signs you're alive, changing, evolving. If you were static, you'd never contradict yourself. Only by moving and testing yourself do the overlaps appear, and that makes you truly human. Don't let them turn contradiction into chains. Make it proof you're maturing. So next time someone cites inconsistencies in your life, don't fear. Take it as a reminder. You matter enough for others to archive every detail, and instead of letting them fire that bullet at you, take it and say, yes, this is me, and it made me stronger. I chose to live that way. I'm no longer obsessed with appearing seamless to everyone. I allow myself to change, accepting that change brings contradiction. Thus, I escape the trap where contradiction becomes a weapon. Do the same. They will keep stockpiling your contradictions into ammo, but you decide whether it hits. That power is yours the moment you choose to own your whole story. When you do, you don't just neutralize the attack. You turn their armory into proof you've grown large enough for the world to record every step. I once thought people tracked only my individual actions, words, decisions, mistakes. Then I realized what obsesses them more isn't me alone, but those who stand beside me. They watch the circle around me like a meteorologist scans the sky, every cloud, gust, and low-pressure front logged, because they think my alliance could become a storm at any moment. I recall a moment clearly. When I was in trouble, someone stepped up to defend me. knowing they'd be dragged into it. I thought it was just personal loyalty. Later I learned that from that instant, eyes in the dark had noted that person's name. They don't just watch me, they want to know who will step into the eye of the storm with me. To them, someone's loyalty isn't sentiment, it's data, and that data defines my risk level. Observers don't care about polite handshakes or shallow praise, they care who appears when the sky turns black and thunder breaks. Like forecasting, they track pressure, temperature, wind to see where a storm will form. With you, they measure every movement in your circle to predict whether you'll be an eye wall or a passing breeze. I saw the calculus. When an old friend slipped away during my trouble, they noted it. They classify who leaves under overcast and who advances under lightning, then draft a map of my alliances. To them, alliances aren't feelings, but pressure charts. Who stands near, who hangs back, who holds firm, who wavers. All analyzed with the chill of climate models. They aren't in a hurry. They can watch for years to see patterns, whom you call first in crisis, who risks reputation to protect you, who vanishes when there's nothing to gain. Each answer becomes a tile in the mosaic of the storm named you. At first I was afraid to know my relationships were scrutinized. Then I realized, if they go that far, I am no longer a lone individual. I'm a center of gravity. I'm a storm seed. Their fear is that I'll gather a circle strong enough to become a real cyclone. Remember, they don't track flimsy alliances or fair weather fans. They study bonds tested by weather, because only relationships that stand in a gale can turn you from breeze to storm. If someone stays when everything breaks, they're not just a friend, they're what keeps observers awake. I learned to see my circle as an ecosystem. I stopped valuing quantity, I value quality. 100 clappers aren't worth one who stands beside me when the world points fingers. Observers think so too. One steadfast ally matters more than a noisy crowd. A true storm doesn't need much wind, only wind aligned. Recall, who didn't leave when you hit bottom? Who called? Who showed up with nothing to gain? Those people make you dangerous in watchers' eyes. An individual can be isolated. A loyal alliance is harder to break. I chose to cultivate such ties instead of chasing outer noise. To be a storm, I don't need everyone. I need those who stand firm when headwinds rise. When I found them, I knew I held what observers fear most. They can forecast a storm but cannot stop it, record pressure but can't change wind. Once you're the eye, their math becomes a useless report. The fourth sign isn't to panic you, it's confirmation. If they scrutinize your relationships, analyzing who stays in the squall, smile. In their eyes, you're strong enough to be the storm's center. Your only job is to choose the right winds. Storms aren't punishment. They prove you can shake the sky. With a loyal circle, you won't just be predicted, you'll be the storm that forces the world to prepare. There was a period in my life when I kept telling myself, it's just a small thing, no one will notice. A meeting a few minutes late. A promise of, I'll do it tomorrow. A message I meant to reply to, but then forgot. Such small details seemed like things no one would care about. I was wrong. Those tiny things are exactly the raw material that feeds observation systems. When I realized it, I shuddered. Not the grand moments, but the small habits are what the algorithm consumes, analyzes, and turns into a weapon. I remember vividly the first time I felt red. I didn't speak, didn't write, yet someone seemed to know exactly what I would do next. I watched them arrange a situation with uncanny precision, as if they had previewed the script in my head. That's when I understood. They don't need to read thoughts. They only need to read habits. And the very small habits I dismissed had become their key. You must understand, observers don't look for dazzling events. They don't wait for a big stumble. They want the daily repetitions. Like an algorithm, they don't care about a single story. They care about patterns. You're late once, maybe fine. But if you're always late, that's a signal. You forget a promise once, overlooked maybe. But if you always say tomorrow, that's data. From that data, they build a model of you. I found myself locked in the very habits I thought harmless. Every time I excused myself as busy, I didn't realize I was repeating a predictable sequence. Every time I kept silent instead of facing something, I didn't realize that silence had become a signal. Gradually, I saw Not explosive moments, but quiet, recurring reactions reveal me most clearly. What stunned me was their lack of hurry, patient as a metronome. They noted each small motion, each familiar word, each repeated expression. Then they computed. They don't need to watch you in crisis. By watching how you handle trifles, they can predict what you'll do when a real crisis hits. I once thought, this is unfair, who doesn't have habits? Then I understood. Fairness isn't their aim, efficiency is. Efficiency comes from turning you into a prediction. If they can know in advance what you'll choose and how you'll react, control sits in their hands. I remember a particular setup. I was forced to choose between staying silent to protect my image or speaking up to protect someone else. Normally, I would choose silence, and they seemed to know it. The scene unfolded exactly as they'd hoped. In that moment, I felt like a puppet, not because I was weak, but because I had let my habits become a calculable formula. Then I learned to break the loop. I began observing myself. I recognized each time I made excuses, each time I chose the safe route, each time I repeated a familiar line, these were all the data their algorithm was devouring, and I began to change. Not explosively, but through small, deliberate choices. I was on time where I used to be late. I acted now instead of tomorrow. I replied to messages I once ignored. Each time I did, I knew I was starving the algorithm. You can do this too. You don't have to break every habit at once. Start at one point. Choose one small thing you routinely postpone and change it. A single change is enough to skew the entire model they've drawn of you. When the model skews, they lose prediction. When they lose prediction, you regain freedom. I learned to love disciplined surprise, not chaotic surprise, but intentional surprise. I no longer let small habits decide my large future. I use discipline to rebuild loops, turning habit into my weapon instead of letting it be eaten by the algorithm. Look at your life right now. Are you repeating familiar excuses, keeping harmless habits that are slowly turning you into an easy-to-read map? If yes, you know why you felt predicted and steered, but believe me, you can change. One conscious decision can break the chain of calculations. So the fifth sign is this. When you notice your small habits being exploited, when others can foresee your reactions from details you thought trivial, be alert. The algorithm is feeding on your habits, but you can starve it by choosing discipline over unconscious repetition. I chose that, and I felt freedom return. I'm no longer a puppet in calculated hands. I'm the one who rewrites my rhythm. Walk like that too. Don't let small habits swallow great power. Turn each small choice into a declaration of freedom. The truth chilled me when I first saw it. My reputation wasn't just discussed, it was measured. They don't sit around asking whether I'm right or wrong, innocent or guilty. What they care about is speed. The speed I collapse, the speed I recover, the speed the public forgets. They turn me into a curve on a chart. How long until trust cracks? How long until it fully collapses? And whether I can surface again after how many days. That is the sixth sign. The collapse curve of your reputation has been estimated in advance. I remember it clearly. When a rumor spread, I worried what people would think. I feared truth would be twisted. The observers didn't care about truth. They didn't debate right or wrong. They watched, eyes fixed on an invisible stopwatch. How long until the noise subsides? How long until my name cools? They didn't discuss ethics. They discussed efficiency. Realizing this sent a cold line down my spine. Understand, in this game, justice is not the metric. Performance is. They don't ask whether you did it. They calculate whether you're worth saving or discarding. If your recovery curve is steep, if you rebound quickly, you're an asset. If it drags on, you're filed under not worth investment. In that world, you're not a person, you're a plot line, a ticker, a risk to be managed. Once, after a damaging incident, I noticed a strange quiet. No one rushed to defend me, no one attacked hard either. They stood back, waiting to see what the graph would draw. When I found my rhythm and tensions eased, a few faces returned, feigning belief. I knew it wasn't faith, it was calculation. They saw my curve hadn't cratered, so they came back as if they'd never left. This is your reality too. Your reputation is weighed not by justice, but by performance charts. People don't ask, are you truly innocent? They ask, if knocked down, how soon can this person be usable again? Every response you make, each day you're silent or struggling, adds data to the chart. I stopped seeking fairness in that system. Fairness was never its aim. I focused on the one thing I could control, recovery's speed. I chose not to lie in the rubble. I stood up, faster, stronger, clearer. Slowly I realized I was the one redrawing the curve. If they can estimate, I can break the estimate. This is not an invitation to live perfectly. No one avoids missteps. No one goes through life without reputation wounds. The difference lies here. How long do you stay down? How long do you let fear hold you? Each day you rise, sooner than predicted, you nullify their report. I once asked, why do some fall hard yet return stronger while others vanish? The answer is resilience. Not spotless purity saved them, but rebound speed. Knowing this, I stopped fearing the court of opinion. I focused on building resilience high enough that no one could guess it. Picture this. They expect you down for 3 months, you're up in 3 weeks. They expect you silent forever, you speak on day 3. The moment you break the forecast, their whole model collapses. You shift from observed pawn to board holder. I chose to live that way. I no longer panic at every fall. I treat each as a chance to prove recovery speed. Each faster rise strips them of the only thing they have, predictability. When prediction goes, power slips from their hands. Carry this truth. If you feel your reputation being measured, if people aren't debating right or wrong but waiting to see how long you'll stay down, remember, that is the 6th sign. They've estimated your collapse curve. Only you can rewrite it. You can let the line plunge and lie there, or you can pull it up, make it vertical with will and action. I was once treated as a number, a plot. I learned to become the exception they can't compute. Do the same. Turn each fall into a spring. Let your recovery speed be your declaration. Don't let them enjoy watching you lie within their prediction. Rise faster, stronger, brighter, until the whole system is forced to redraw the chart. Then you'll understand your reputation was never in their hands. It has always been in yours, the only hands that can decide the speed of your return.